Do you want to make beautifully colored buttercreams but skip the usual artificial food coloring options? Well, I've got good news for you. Today, we'll use a variety of plant-derived ingredients to mix our colors, see how much of each ingredient we'll need to achieve the perfect palette, and see just how pleasing they are to our palette. That is, I'm going to do some taste testing along the way and discuss the flavors of each ingredient and which ones are more suitable for a neutrally flavored color additive for your buttercream. So let's hop into it. I started with a big batch of my usual vanilla buttercream, and I allotted about 8 ounces for each color, so enough for about 1 piping bag per shade. And then instead of mixing the powders directly into the buttercream, you'll notice I do something a little different. I use the same method that I typically use to mix in my gel colors. I microwave like a small portion of the buttercream for about 5 to 10 seconds separately. Stir in the color to this warm buttercream completely to encourage the colors to absorb more fully, and then I add this to the rest of the buttercream. This tends to result in brighter colors in your buttercream, and you don't have to use as much of your food coloring product. So I started with this beautiful cactus fruit powder and got this pink color. Next, I moved on to dragon fruit powder. And for both of these, I only used half a teaspoon, and the resulting color was a really pleasing pink color for each. And after taste testing them, they had virtually no aftertaste, so I would think that either of these is a great option for pink. Before adding any of these colors to your buttercream, you should definitely sift them through a fine mesh sieve. This way you'll avoid lumps when smoothing or piping later. Now moving on to red, I opted to use beet powder for my red color. I used about a half teaspoon to start out with, and the resulting color was pretty pale, so I do end up adding more to it to see how bright I can get it to resemble a more, cheery red color. The yellow pumpkin powder was a fine texture and mixed to a really pleasant pale yellow color. Powder didn't have much of an aftertaste, and in this small amount, it wasn't noticeable in the buttercream either, so it's a great option for yellow. And moving on to turmeric, it imparted a really vibrant lemon yellow color, but despite using less than 1/8 of a teaspoon, the flavor was much too strong for my liking. Now, I love matcha, the flavor of it, and it makes a very nice green mossy color for your frosting, but there's a definite aftertaste even when adding only a half teaspoon. So that's something to keep in mind, that it's not totally neutral. Now, the spirulinas were the most surprising to me. I had no idea what flavor to expect with them. The green one made a really pretty sage or kind of eucalyptus shade, and then the blue one was an awesome royal blue color. I was pretty excited when I saw that it came out so vibrantly. And I found that I needed very little powder to achieve these bold colors. I started only with a 1/4 teaspoon after seeing how dark each of these powders was, and I ended up adding more to the green one just to get it a little more green. And the change in flavors wasn't noticeable at all. I did taste the powders, and they had a slightly weedy or corn silk flavor with a slightly salty finish. When I first began mixing this butterfly pea flower, I thought it'd be more periwinkle, but it produced a really nice sky blue in contrast to the royal blue of the spirulina, and it didn't impart a strong flavor to the buttercream at all. Now, my blueberry powder was the clumpiest. I couldn't force it through the sieve, so I just tried to mash it into the buttercream as best as I could. I think that's because while I was prepping to film, the powders, the ones that I had portioned, I let them out, and it was exposed to humidity for a while longer, which I think made it a little sticky. That's a good reminder when you're using these ingredients, make sure that they're sealed in an airtight container if you have any left over to avoid this, and ensure that they'll sift more easily for you and you won't have to deal with clumps. So the gokuma, or sweet potato, specifically it's a Korean sweet potato, the powder didn't initially impart much color, so I mixed in much more later on until it came out as brightly colored purple as the blueberry frosting. So there was more sweet potato flavor to it. The acai wasn't the bright purple that I expected from acai bowls. It instead looked kind of like a speckled gray color. Evidently, they add fruit and vegetable juices. They're often added to acai sorbet to get that signature kind of purpley color. Now that all of our colors are mixed, I'd like to bag them up and see how they look when they're piped and spread. I like the color variety here, but I wish I had an orange color. The carrot powder I ordered was more beige, and the tangerine powder was more yellow, but it was delicious. I did try mixing turmeric and beets to get an orange, but it came out gold and the flavor wasn't great. Starting with our acai, it has the appearance of almost like a cookies and cream frosting. It had a mild flavor, So if I wanted it to be acai flavored, I would be adding much more to it. In the future, I would likely try dissolving the blueberry powder more fully in like a hot water before adding it to the buttercream, just to get rid of those chunks. It would probably help dissolve the sugar, and hope that the higher temperature of the water wouldn't affect the color too much. For the kokuma, it had a really nice mild sweetness, and likely if I was making a big batch of this, I would actually substitute a good portion of the powdered sugar for this powder. It has a sweetness of its own. The sweet potato flavor came through because I did add 2 extra teaspoons to get that brighter purple color. Now, the beet frosting was really pretty after I added 2 teaspoons, but it had a definite beet aftertaste, like too distinct to go unnoticed, so it wouldn't be my first choice for red buttercream. But these are our finished colors, and I wanted to swipe those swatches to give you an idea of what to expect texture-wise if you plan to frost a whole cake with them instead of just piping. So where might you find some of these ingredients? I would suggest either a baking supply shop, which is where I found a handful of these, or a Whole Foods type health store where people have organic additives for smoothies and things like that. Additionally, there are natural food colorings out there, like I know specifically Watkins carries a red, yellow, green, blue set, and it's like your typical liquid food coloring you'd find at the grocery store. So I'm loving all of these colors, and in relation to the rest of the rainbow, I like this red just fine in comparison to these other slightly pastel colors. But if you've worked with food colorings before, you know how much of a struggle it is to get a deep, bold red color. Inevitably, you'll find yourself like adding more and more and more red food coloring just to get it to look right. So I hear you're asking, how much of these natural food colorings will I actually have to add to my buttercream to get a nice bright red color? Let's find out. For this experiment, we're going to try cactus fruit powder, beet powder, and strawberry powder, and also tomato powder, which was a bit of a wild card. And we'll just keep adding them until we get a brighter red color. So I definitely didn't expect the tomato powder to turn out very red at all. Thinking back to making pastas, I was expecting more of an orange shade, honestly, which would have been great, but what I got was just not what I was going for. It was very separated looking, and the color was kind of just off-putting, pale, pasty terracotta. It didn't look very appetizing, and honestly, it tasted pretty gross. And I love tomatoes, but no, it was not gonna work. Setting that aside, our remaining colors came out great. Ultimately, I needed about 3/4 of an ounce of each of these powders. I think it was like 20 grams. That being said, the flavors of these are much more pronounced, which totally knocked beets out of the running for my favorite. I love beets, and I could see it being great when paired with the right flavors of cakes and fillings, but for general use, I definitely skip it. So we're left with the cactus fruit and the strawberry, which both tasted delicious, and I think ultimately strawberry was my favorite. Here you can see where I frosted this little cake. There are some little flecks, but it's not like the flecks aren't thick enough to keep you from spreading it smoothly. And then the cactus fruit looked awesome also, although compared to the strawberry, you definitely notice it has more of a purpley undertone than the strawberry does, which is kind of more of a primary red leaning more towards a red-orange color. So with all this in mind, I would probably only rule out the matcha, turmeric, and beets. Beets, again, the flavor was too strong. Matcha, I love matcha, but the bitter aftertaste was very noticeable, so I wouldn't count on it for a neutrally flavored green buttercream. And then the turmeric it wasn't gonna work. It was too strong. It was too spicy and weird. Anyway, so I think we came up with some really nice color alternatives. If you like this video and would like to see another video where we see how these powders performed when baked into batters, check out my other upcoming video. Stay tuned for that. I hope this helped answer some of your questions, and that this video will at least serve as a good jumping off point for your own recipes. If you try out any of these ingredients yourself or other ingredients like it, let us all know what you find in the comments. I'd love to foster a community here where we can all help each other out. Thanks so much for going on this colorful journey with me, and until next time, happy baking and decorating from Cakes by You.